Welcome to the Weather Insights podcast. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney, along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner. Jeff, how are you?
Good, how are y'all?
Doing great. We have a very special guest. We're very excited to have Josh Morgerman, professional storm chaser and good friend of ours, joining the show today to talk about the 2024 hurricane season, along with tips how you can better protect your home for next year's season. Josh, welcome to Weather Insights. How are you?
Good. Great to be back, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump right in. What are your thoughts on this year's hurricane season?
God, what a weird season. Kind of bipolar, Started with a bang. Hurricane Beryl, earliest Category 5, big long tracker wreaking havoc through the Caribbean, Mexico, and the US. And it's like, whoa, this is going to be a crazy season. Then it kind of got dead during peak season. It's kind of like, okay, where are the hurricanes? And then we got this big late season rush. So really like just a weird season, started with a bang, slow in the middle, ending with a bang, it feels like.
Yeah, very much so. And most of the action was confined along the Gulf Coast. And of course, you have the hurricane house there in Bay St. Louis. Did you ever at any time think that maybe the house was going to be put to the test?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because it was a very Gulf-centric year. We had 5 U.S. landfalling hurricanes, which is not a record, but way up there. The record is actually 6 landfalls. So we were up near that record, and they were all on the Gulf Coast. Now, if you look at hurricane history over like the decades, you'll find that some decades are more East Coast, some are more Florida focused. This is definitely, we're in a Gulf phase right now. If you go back to like the mid-teens, it's just year after year of the Gulf getting pounded. And what I could say from this, my vantage point in Mississippi, which is right smack in the middle of the Gulf Coast, the hurricanes passed to our west and they passed to our east. We were one of the only states that was not hit, just us and Alabama. And that's because we're such small targets. We each have such a little bit of coastline.
Yeah. Now, I know you paid a visit to Texas with Beryl. What was that experience like for you?
Whoa, that was a real surprise. That was an example. I think Beryl is a textbook example of how, don't ever say, oh, it was just a Category 1, because that thing, it was a Category 1 hurricane, but it aimed just right to really kind of smash Houston on the chin. I was in Matagorda right where it came ashore, and it was an impressive little storm as it came in. It actually had quite a kick. But I think what is going to make it sort of remembered in the history books is what happened in Houston. And folks are like, that can't be a Category 1. What? Like, no way. It was, but what happened was it aimed perfectly. So Houston got the exact worst part of it. Houston got that right front quadrant that just smashed the city head on. And you had the nation's 4th largest city getting full on hurricane conditions. And that's always going to be a big deal.
Yeah, and boy, that was a forecasting nightmare as far as direction. That thing was a moving target first, from northeast Mexico, and then finally all the way up to Houston. From one extreme to another, we had that, and then we had a very well forecasted track with Helene. Jeff, we do these tropical briefings. We had some interesting discussions this hurricane season, to say the least.
Hey, Josh, what was your most memorable experience this season?
God, yeah, that's a great question. I chase all over the world, not just in the United States, but everywhere. And I chase a lot in East Asia. They're called typhoons. A typhoon is a hurricane, same exact thing. In terms of internationally, I would say it was a typhoon in Taiwan, which was much stronger than I expected. It kind of like was really a scary experience. Stateside, I would have to say it was the double whammy of Helene and then Milton in Florida. Two major hurricane impacts in a row. Another thing about hurricane history we'll notice is that, hurricanes will pick a target and then keep wailing on it. And right now it seems like the 2 big targets are Louisiana and Florida. And those 2 states can't catch a break. And that was one of the things that really was underlined for me this year, is that Florida can't catch a break.
I'd like to hear you guys talk a little bit, because of course Jeff has done damage surveys and tons of hurricanes. And Josh, you're there, you penetrated, I think, 78 eye walls now. It's just an incredible number. So you're there during and for the aftermath too. Maybe you guys can talk about that a little bit. Some of the surveys today. I know, Jeff, you went to Florida this year.
Yeah, we did Helene, the storm surge survey for Helene up in the Panhandle, and the damage was very bad up there. I don't think people really realize it. It kind of got lost in the story of Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee, which believe me is horrible. But the it's not as populated up in the Florida Big Bend area, and so there's smaller towns, not as much coverage up there. But the storm surge damage was every bit I saw with Michael and Ian and Ida and Laura and all of them. It was really bad up in the Big Bend area.
Jeff, can I ask you what was, I'm actually glad you mentioned this because I was wondering what were the peak storm surge values that you got in that Big Bend area?
Yeah, we got some values up over 15 feet datum, so nav D88. And then you have to reduce that back down to ground level. The ground level elevations were a little bit different. And so, anywhere from 10 to 13 feet or so. Of course, the Hurricane Center is still looking at all the data coming in. And I think there was a USGS gauge up there that measured 13 feet or so around Steenhatchee. But it was, I say it was bad, but a lot of that's older construction up there. It's 1960s, 1970s construction. A lot of it's relatively low, and so it doesn't take a big storm surge to produce a lot of damage. I mean, one of the big lessons that we learned, not necessarily learned, but we heard from the folks up there is that Dahlia saved a lot of lives. They went through a Dahlia last year, and the water got up, and they knew when the Hurricane Center, the Weather Service was talking 10, 15 feet, they knew exactly what that meant, and they left. There was very few people that we talked with that stayed up in that area. So Adalia, unlike a lot of these other hurricanes we've dealt with recently, Adalia saved a lot of lives because there was a precedent before the big one hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just want to add to that, Steenhatchee in particular, that little town got a direct hit from Adalia last year. They had some storm surge damage. I wouldn't call it catastrophic, but it was significant. Then this year they had Debbie, category 1, came in right there, very little damage. And they're like, okay, we got off easy this time. And then boom, Helene and Milton. I mean, that town just cannot catch a break. I mean, they're going to look back, this town 100 years from now, they're going to look back at 2023, 2024 is like their dark zone.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. Because if you go back in history, they really haven't had hurricanes of this magnitude up there in 150 years or so. So, hey, Josh, tell us a little bit about the Hurricane House. I don't know if a lot of people really know what you have there on the Mississippi coast. Explain a little bit about what you built there.
Yeah, so I built, so I live in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, which is ground zero for some of the worst hurricanes in American history. Not just Hurricane Katrina, which devastated this town, but also going back in time, Category 5 Hurricane Camille, second strongest in the United States, made landfall right here with estimated winds of 175 miles an hour. And I'm a block from the Gulf. So when I built my house, I was like, all right, I gotta, past the history will be the future. And I'm like, all right, we're going to get other bad hurricanes here. So I'm not going to just build a house. I'm going to build a bunker, the hurricane house, which I'm sitting in right now. And I did all kinds of things to make it hurricane resistant, to make this house just kind of basically ready for anything, at least in terms of wind and rain.
So you storm chase all over the world, and I'm sure you notice kind of the damage that happens in these storms and everything. So did you use some of that experience of what you've seen out there in the field of these big storms and building and using the proper stuff at your house there?
100%, absolutely. What I've seen around the world informed it. So three things that I was like really emotional about as I sort of designed this house and decided what materials to use. So first off, I thought a lot about the roof. Okay. I went with a standing seam metal roof because I went through Category 5 Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas, sustained winds of 185 miles an hour. And what I noticed was that the houses that had this metal standing seam roof, the roof stayed on. And that's really important because if you lose your roof during a hurricane, it's game over. So I would say, just to make this into kind of useful advice for your viewers and listeners, I would say, really think about your roof. It doesn't need to be a metal standing seam roof, although that is the best kind, but have you re-roofed in a while? And if not, have that looked at, because the roof, it's all about the roof. Secondly, the windows. The windows are the vulnerable point for a lot of houses. So I think about that a lot. And I would say you have two options. One is go with impact glass, which is the kind that it's kind of like the stuff that car windshields are made of. So it won't shatter, it won't explode if flying debris hits it, or do what I did and have good solid shutters to close over them. And then the third thing, and I think in some ways is the most important, is your siding. Because I look at the siding on my house as sort of like its coat of armor. And I think with this, I really thought, okay, what kind of material is best? Now, since I'm a traditionalist, I wanted to go with wood, but my builder was like, no, we're going to go with a fiber cement product. Because actually the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, they say that fiber cement is actually the best material to use if you want to build to resist wind, rain, the impact of flying debris and everything else. So that's what I went with. And I actually went with James Hardie, which is the industry leader for this kind of siding, because this stuff, it resists everything, not just the wind impact of flying debris, but also it doesn't burn, it doesn't rot. Termites don't like it, which is a big deal in Mississippi because termites eat everything. So that was another thing. And I feel like I said, I rest easy at night because I feel like my house has this kind of coat of armor. This stuff is solid.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the cost difference from, let's say, a normal house versus your house? I mean, it kind of put it in perspective for people if they're building a house and you're going to go to this length of hurricane protection and preparedness, how much do you think in ballpark added to the price of the house?
You'd be surprised, not a lot. I think this is an area where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You know, my house, this is called a fortified gold house for a variety of reasons. And to get the fortified gold rating, you have to have like an evaluator kind of looks at the house as you're building it. And what happens is they'll come and they'll get in the roof and they'll look at how you're doing things. And at a couple points, they'll give your builder inputs, things that they need to do to kind of get it up to fortified standard. And basically the feedback that we were getting from the evaluator and the stuff that we needed to do to get the house up to the fortified gold level was not a whole lot. It was actually getting a couple more straps and braces in a couple of places and things like that. And here's the deal. You save in the long run, because what's really costly is your roof ripping off, okay? Or being displaced for months and things like that. And also one last thing I want to mention is the insurance. Insurance has become a very sort of hot topic on the Gulf Coast, particularly Louisiana and Florida. And folks are getting very upset about those rates and they're wondering how to get them down. I always say, don't get mad. Make your house more sort of insurable by making it more, sort of better built. Your premiums, you could get lower premiums if you build it the right way and if you do these things.
Josh, I'm wrapping up. Where can our viewers go to continue to get information about tips to better protect their home and to follow you?
I would say, number one, think about the siding on your house and think about re-siding if you haven't, and go to jameshardie.com to learn about their products. And like I said, whatever style you want, whether you want to do an historical look like I did because I built an historical district, or you want a totally modern looking house, you could do it with the James Hardie materials because they come in all kinds of styles. And like I said, this stuff is engineered for climate. It'll get your house through a hurricane.
Great. Well, thank you, Josh. We'll put all that information in the show notes. It was great to catch up with you, my friend. We will see you soon.
Great to see you guys. Thank you.
You bet.